Welcome everyone to Insights into the Weekly Haftorah. This week's Parsha is Vayishlach. This is where Yaakov reconnects, confronts Esav. We're going to talk about the Haftorah, but we know that the Haftorah always follows either the major theme or one of the themes of the Torah portion. So the whole beginning of the Parsha is Yaakov sending gifts, praying for peace, preparing for war, his fight with the man, angel, himself, Esav, God, his winning the wrestling match and having conferred a new name upon him, Yisrael. And then the next day he meets Esav, and instead of a huge war confrontation, they meet, and there's a very, very important Rashi that, because it says that Esav kissed Yaakov, and on the word kissed, there are dots over the word kissed. And the sages had a disagreement what these dots represent. One opinion is that the kiss was not a sincere kiss. In fact, one of the midrashim say that Esav actually tried to bite his neck and kill him. But interesting enough, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the great mystic, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, says, halacha hi Esav soneh et Yaakov. He says it's a halacha, meaning it's immutable law of nature that Esav hates Yaakov. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, but the dots over the word kissed indicates that in this particular situation, he was sincere. That after all of his hatred for Yaakov and actually wanting to kill him, his heart melted when he actually saw him. And this parsha talks about what they discussed, and then the parsha continues. So the Haftorah is actually it's from the shortest book of the prophets. There are three major prophets: Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. And then there are what are called the 12 minor prophets. But it has to be pointed out, when they're called the minor prophets, it doesn't mean that their prophecies are any less important than the three major ones. It just means that their books are shorter. The Haftorah from this week is the entire book of Ovadiah. The whole book of Ovadiah is 21 verses. And there's only one other time that for a Haftorah we read an entire book. The other time is on Yom Kippur. At Mincha time, we read the entire book of Jonah. But Jonah is not a lot of chapters, but it's not just 21 verses. And so this prophet, the reason that it was chosen, we're going to see there are two. It's all about we'll call it the vengeance, the mida keneged mida that Esav will get for its oppressing Israel throughout the generations. That's what the whole book is about. Now, what's interesting here is that Ovadiah, he's a convert from Esav, from Edom. He was not born Jewish. He was a convert from Esav. And so in the Gemara, it says the fact that God chose him to deliver this prophecy to Edom. Now, here we see something important, because most of the prophecies are aimed or directed to Israel. But within many different prophecies, the prophet turns to neighboring nations and prophesizes about them. So the whole book of Ovadiah is like warning Esav of the measure for measure that they are going to receive. And so the statement in the Gemara is that this is the perfect example. What it says, that from the forest itself comes the handle of the axe that will destroy it. Because the handle of the axe comes from the tree. So here, God chose a convert from Esav, from Edom, to prophesy against them. So, as I said, it's a relatively short Haftorah, but it doesn't mean it's not as important. And we'll see the two that I'm going to read to you is Rashi quotes from this Haftorah from the book of Ovadiah in the beginning of the next parsha, Vayishlach. One second. Wait, give me 1 second. I just have to look up something. Yes, the second verse of next, not this week's parsha, next week, Vayishlach, it says, Ela toldot Yaakov Yosef. These are the generations of Yaakov, Yosef. This week's parsha ends with a long description of all of the different generals and families of Esav. It's very, very long and detailed. And so Rashi wants to know what's the juxtaposition that Parshat Vayishlach ends with this whole description of the lineage of Esav. And then the next parsha begins, these are the generations of Yaakov, Yosef. And so Rashi quotes from this Haftorah. And I'm going to read the whole part. These are verses 15 through 18 of the book of Ovadiah. So it says, for the day of God over all the nations is close. As you have done will be done to you. That's what I said, mida keneged mida, a measure for a measure. Your recompense will be returned upon your head. For as you drank on my holy mount, shall all the nations drink constantly, and they will drink and be stunned, and they will be as though they were not. And Mount Zion, there shall be a remnant, and it shall be holy, and the house of Jacob shall inherit those who inherited them. Now this next two verses is what Rashi quotes to explain what's the juxtaposition of the lineage of Esav and the generations of Yaakov is Yosef. And this is what he quotes. And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Yosef a flame, and the house of Esav shall become stubble, and they shall ignite them and consume them. And the house of Esav shall have no survivors, for God has spoken. So that's what Rashi quotes, the juxtaposition between the lineage of Esav and Yaakov Yosef, that in the end of days, the measure for measure will be that the flame and the fire of Yaakov and Yosef will consume Esav. And then the last verse of the book of Ovadiah has been placed in our daily prayers in Shachrit, right before we end what was called Pesukei de Zimra. There's a quote from Ovadiah, and in English it says, deliverers will ascend Mount Zion to judge the mountains of Esav, and the kingdom will be God's. And in our prayers, though, they add a verse from Zechariah. So in Hebrew, it's V'yalu Moshiim Bahar Tzion Lishpot et Har Esav, that deliverers will rise up on Mount Zion, and they will judge the mountain of Esav. And V'haita Lashem Melucha, and Hashem will be king. For those who are here at the beginning, I played the song Hashem Melech. Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch Leolam Bo'ed. And I said, I chose that song because it's connected to this Haftorah. But in our prayers, they add from Zechariah, V'haya Hashem Lamelech Al Kol Ha'oretz, V'yomahu Yeh Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. And that in that day, Hashem will become king over all the earth. On that day, God will be one and his name will be one. So this is from the book of Ovadiah. I want to mention a little bit more about Ovadiah. He was a very, very special neshama. God willing, as we go through the books of the Nevi'im, we're going to get to the book of Malachim. And he appears in the book of Malachim in a major way. He was a student of Eliyahu Navi. At that time, the king and queen of the northern tribes, Achav and Jezebel, not just wanted, but they were killing off all of the prophets, because all the prophets were against them because they had introduced the worship of the Baal, a foreign god, especially through the king's wife. She came from a foreign country, and she introduced the worship of Baal, and it spread like wildfire in Israel. And all the prophets were speaking out against them. So the king and queen had an easy solution. We're just going to kill them all. So Ovadiah, and his name is Oved Hashem. Ovadiah means the servant of God. So he actually worked for the king, Achav, who was considered one of the most evil kings. But what did he do? He hid 100 prophets in a cave. And from his own resources, he fed them. And literally every day, and his wife was in on this completely, every single day they risked their lives. And they fed these 100 prophets in this cave. And one of them that survived was Eliyahu, a Navi, and he fled to Har Sinai. And later, God sent him back to Achav. And that whole story we'll get to. But Ovadiah, the Gemara in Sanhedrin, says that at this point he was not a prophet. But because of his incredible, what's called Mesirut Nefesh, his selflessness in saving these 100 prophets, that God granted him prophecy. And God shows him, for especially the last verse that we read, that redeemers will come to Har Zion and will judge the mountain of Esav, and Hashem will be the king. And that's we say it every single day in our prayers. And so Ovadiah was a very, very special neshama. And as we've mentioned before, some of the greatest souls in Jewish history were converts. And we know that the grandmother of David HaMelech was Ruth. David HaMelech comes from a family of converts. Rabbi Akiva comes from a family of converts. Rabbi Meir comes from a family of converts. So Ovadiah, and I'll just end with one last thing, that based on the story in Malachim, it says that Ovadiah had great Yirat Hashem, had great awe and fear of God. And the Gemara actually says that at a certain level, he even surpassed Avram Avinu in his awe of God. And that's why he literally risked his life every day to save these prophets, because he knew they were speaking the words of God. And he was like a double agent on top of everything, because he worked in the household of the wicked king. So he was like a double agent and risking his life every day. And based on his selflessness, God shows him to be a prophet. So it's a very, very beautiful, beautiful teaching. It's a blessing.
Bye-bye.
Oh no.
What's wrong?
Did you miss